Koro taha te pō, koro taha te ao no runga nei koe no raro nei au whāno. Ara mai te tō ki o haumi e, hui e, taiki e. This week on The Hui. With unemployment rates rising for Māori and Pacifica, we sit down with the Minister for Social Development and Employment, Louise Upston.
I want to make sure that MSD is far more proactive. We have far more interactions.
Okay, what about the possibility, though, of some whānau who may lose 50% of their benefit as a result of this approach? That is punitive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And a dream is now a reality for whānau in Wairarapa.
To have this whenua means that we have somewhere to call home, somewhere where we can return back to.
The next step is to build affordable homes with the use of technology.
So they're modular builds, but being modular means that we're able to stand stuff up quickly, getting from nothing to pretty much establishing a whare in 2 to 4 days with waterproofing.
Ngā mate o te wā pūrara, hara mai haere. Tātou kei te pito ora, ti hewa mauri ora, and welcome back to The Hui. Māori unemployment has risen in the last 6 months to more than 9%, almost double the general unemployment rate. At the same time, sanctions for beneficiaries are rising rapidly. Today, the government announced even tougher sanctions, including putting half their benefit onto a payment card. It's one of many issues we put to the Minister of Social Development and Employment, Louise Upston. Mea nei, tā maua kōrero. E te Minita Minister, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your time. I wanted to start with Māori unemployment. We've seen an increase in Māori unemployment over the last 2 quarters, a 2.3% increase in Māori unemployment. Why is that? What do you think is behind that?
Yeah, so unfortunately the reality is when economic times are tough and we've inherited a low growth economy, Māori are affected more than others. That's been a reality over many years, but it does bother me, particularly because we also know that Māori are likely to spend longer on benefit than non-Māori. So we do have to work hard to really interrupt what's going on to improve their opportunities.
Why is it so high by comparison to the general unemployment rate? 4.6%, Māori at 9.1%. Why is that, do you think?
Yeah, as I said, Māori are usually disadvantaged in the labour market. That's been happening for quite some time, which means, from my perspective, we have to work harder to ensure that we don't see those numbers get worse. But more importantly, we actually need to make sure that we are returning people to work more quickly. And that's why, in my time as a minister, I've wanted to make sure that the welfare system is far more proactive. And rather than sitting back and seeing someone come onto a job seeker benefit, potentially having no contact with them for 12 months, we need to do a lot better than that.
It's an interesting choice of words, proactive, because there'll be opponents that will say the more appropriate word is punitive. What's your response?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
How so?
Yeah, so this is all about, what's my end goal? My end goal is to get more Māori into employment. Why is that? Because we know that your future opportunities and choices are so much broader by being in work. And so I absolutely hold fast to that as the end goal. So if somebody comes on to the job seeker benefit, gets no attention for 12 months, we don't know what support they need. We don't know if they haven't got a driver's licence. We don't know if there's literacy or numeracy problems. We don't know about the support that is available and funded that we can connect them with to improve their chances. So absolutely it's about being proactive. There's a massive amount of support that's available, but if we don't see people, we can't make that connection.
The charge, though, that many will put to you is the fact that there have been 10,389, up to 53.7% more action in regard to sanctions for those that are on benefits. And the ones that are more adversely affected are the ones that, for a phrase, are at the lower end of the scale. They're the ones that feel the burn more than others. So how do you deal with that without adversely even worse for them, impacting them in a much more worse way that gets them in the system longer and deeper.
So let me be really frank about what is the worst outcome. That a young Māori under the age of 25 goes on to the job seeker benefit, will spend on average 22 years there. So I'm unwilling to sit back and watch that happen. So that is the worst outcome. So what does someone need to improve their chances of being in work? To take steps like having an up-to-date CV, going to a seminar, making sure that they're connected with training opportunities like driver licensing, going to a job interview, taking a job that's offered. Those are called work obligations. The work obligations are all about improving somebody's chances of getting a job. That's what this is all about. So I fully accept that there will be people out there who will label this as punitive. It is absolutely not. I want to improve the chances of Māori of getting into employment because I know the enormous difference that it makes to them and their whānau. So I'm not going to sit back. I want to make sure that MSD is far more proactive. We have far more interactions to improve that chance.
Okay, what about the possibility, though, of some whānau who may lose 50% of their benefit as a result of this approach? That is punitive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But what I would say is by fulfilling your work obligations, that won't happen. And by fulfilling your work obligations, you're improving your chance of getting a job. By having a job and an income, you will be far better off and you'll have a far better future than not being in work. The other thing that I would say is I'm very deliberately introducing non-financial sanctions because I have been concerned about the impact that just financial sanctions have on a family.
So what does that look like? Non-financial sanctions, what does that mean?
Well, what it means is instead of going straight to a financial sanction, which means, as you say, up to 50% of a benefit being reduced, two options. One is money management, which means you get the same amount of benefit, but there'll be a payment card and you'll have less choice around how that benefit is spent. The second alternative is community work experience. So we are saying there's still a consequence if you haven't fulfilled your obligations, your work obligations, but understanding the concern that New Zealanders have about financial sanctions on children, we will be introducing two alternatives.
The money card and the limitations on how that money can be spent actually sounds like a way, it's almost an authoritarian approach. It's saying you don't actually trust those on benefits to be able to spend the money in the best way that they can for the family that they have. So
the alternative at the moment is a 50% reduction of the benefit amount. So this is an alternative. Yes, it's a consequence. It's a consequence of somebody not taking the steps they need to take to improve their chances to find a job. And there is a consequence. That consequences means you lose some of your choices available about how you spend the full amount of the benefit that you would receive.
I want to talk about child poverty. With child poverty rates still high, why have the targets been reduced for poverty now, and in particular for child poverty?
Yeah. So thanks for that question, because it's really important to explain where we are right now. So when the child poverty results came out in February this year, they were for the 2 years up to the 30th of June 23. And unfortunately, the three primary measures, including material hardship, had all got worse. So that meant the target that is in front of us just got so much further away. So I wanted to set the next intermediate target based on reality, as opposed to an aspirational target that was never going to be accomplished.
The word you used was intermediate, though.
Yes.
Again, the charge might be that with an increase in job seeker benefit numbers and a hardened focus on potential sanctions for those on benefits, they may see the lowering of the target as actually the raising of a white flag. What's your response?
Definitely not. As I said, unfortunately, we have come at a time where the child poverty numbers have been going up, and we expect, unfortunately, with the economic conditions, it'll continue to get worse. If you look at what is really the driver of material hardship, it's the cost of living. So our focus has been reducing the cost of living pressure on households because that is the single most effective tool to reduce the number of children in poverty, because we know that the cost of living affects those households on benefit as well as low incomes disproportionately. And that's why, if you look at the measures in Budget 24, around tax relief, around family boost, that's all focused on families, low and middle income households, and those measures will lift 17,000 children out of poverty.
Kei tatunu mai e tiwi. After the break, part 2 of our interview with Minister Louise Upston. Kia mautonu mai rā. Hoki mai anō e tā marama. Part 2 of our discussion with Minister Louise Upston starts with the preferences for the name for the Ministry for Disabled People, Whaikaha. Minister, can you explain the rationale behind the decision to remove the Māori name, Whaikaha, from the Ministry of Disabled People?
So it's not removed. There are 3 names, Whaikaha, the Ministry of Disabled People, and there's a name in New Zealand Sign Language. My expectation is that all 3 names continue to be used, and all I have done is followed the coalition agreement, which is to use the English name first. I use the names interchangeably, and as I said, I expect all 3 names will continue to be used.
Okay, so when you called for a rebrand, what you were calling for was what exactly?
No, I haven't asked for a rebrand. I have just said that the expectation is that English is used first. I'm not interested in any taxpayer money being spent on a rebrand that is incorrect. All I've said is that there are 3 names, and of the 3 names, my expectation is that English is first.
Okay, why?
Well, that's the coalition agreement.
But tell me why. Like, why English first? I know it's coalition policy, coalition agreement. Tell me why.
So my feedback on that would be that many New Zealanders don't understand some of the names of the government agencies that they need to seek services from. And I would, Whaikaha is very, very well understood in the disability community. I'm not sure how well understood it is in mainstream New Zealand population. And so if a New Zealander became disabled, needed to access disability services, would they know where to go? So I'm following the coalition's agreement, but as I said, we have Whaikaha, we have the Ministry of Disabled People, and we have a sign language name.
The reason why I ask, I guess, is because I've read the Royal Commission's report into abuse in state care. There's a lot of narrative in there about the use of Whaikaha by disabled people themselves who were abused in state care. There is mana in that name. There is identity in that name. According to the CEO, there is whakapapa in that name. So when you hear that and then you still push for the English name to be used first, the charge again and the accusation could be actually that you're limiting and potentially also alienating disabled people from the identity that they find in the name Whaikaha.
Yeah, so I'm not for a moment suggesting that Whaikaha is not used. I use it a lot myself. And I understand that the gifting of that name was important, which is why I continue to use it, as do others. And I think it's important that people are able to use names that they feel comfortable with. And I do recognise that one of the principles of enabling good lives is around, mana enhancing. and I fully accept that for tangata whaikaha, for the disabled community more broadly, that whaikaha is important to them.
Dr. Huhana Hiki, in an interview with us, suggested and considered or wanted the crowd to consider the introduction of a levy or special payment to support disabled individuals in the workforce. Are you open to that idea? Is that something that you could explore to support disabled people, tangata whaikaha?
Well, firstly, what I'd like to see is that the disability support services that are available, and there's a review underway at the moment, are actually helping to deliver goals and plans that disabled people have. There is also funding through the Ministry of Social Development specifically targeted towards supporting more disabled people into work. So I want to ensure that what is in place is working well. The other area that I'm acutely aware of is the transition from school into employment or into further education. There are far more barriers for disabled people than for others. So that's an area I'm actively looking at how we can improve. And anyone I've met with, I've said I'm open to ideas, I'm open to solutions, and I'm open to considering what Dr. Hiki is proposing.
So you're open to the idea potentially of a levy like an ACC levy to support disabled people, tangata whaikaha?
I'm open to suggestions and solutions that will support more disabled people into work.
Okay. Are you concerned that up to $60 million approximately is set to be paid out in proposed redundancies in public service job cuts?
Look, it is concerning, and what's concerning for anyone who loses their job is an incredibly stressful time. But it's also incredibly stressful for a low-income household that is struggling to put food on the table, to pay their rent, to pay their power, and to get through each day and each week. So what we have to do is to rein in government spending so that we're able to support low-income households with the very daily, weekly challenge that they face. And this time of rebalancing will be challenging, but when we get through the other side of it, it's about how we ensure we build up a stronger economy and we've taken that very real pressure off of households.
Minister, I wanted to ask you also about the Steps to Freedom grant. We ran a story about a man called Cassius Kukutai, who works at a native nursery at Te Māngai Trust, who received a Steps to Freedom grant at $350. At the time we played that story in May, you were considering options as to whether or not you would look to extend that potentially up to $1,000. Where are we at with this now?
So I've sought advice. The previous government had done some initial work on what the increase of Steps to Freedom could be, so we'll take that into consideration. That's only one part of the support that we provide prisoners when they come out, and some of the programs include how we support them into employment. And the reality is, for someone coming out, we want to improve their chances of a different life. That means having somewhere to live and the ability to earn an income. Te Māngai Trust do fantastic work, and that's what we need to do more of, working with iwi and community organisations to actually help those coming out to get on their own 2 feet and to improve their chances. Steps to Freedom grant is a small part of what we need to do and what we are doing.
When do you think you might make a final determination on a possible increase in Steps to Freedom grants?
So any increases come down to a budget process and what we might need to stop doing to fund a change. So that's something that we'll get advice later in the year. And as I say, it's not all of the support that we provide prisoners in terms of that reintegration process.
Minister, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us on the program. Ngā mihi nui kia koe.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Kia mautunu maira e te iwi, he kaupapa haka hirahira anō te haere ake nei. A small hapu with big plans to develop an innovative constructive method delivering affordable homes for whānau. E Aotehui, 3 years ago, a small Wairarapa hapu put out a tono on social media to buy back their ancestral land. Ngāti kahukura awhitia having a dream to have whānau return back home. They're now looking to social media again to support their cutting-edge housing project. Reporter John Boyton returned to the Wairarapa to see how they're bringing their dream to life.
In 2021, a small Wairarapa hapu wanted to buy this land. An enormous feat, competing with buyers and developers with deep pockets.
If we can get our people back to the whenua and we can live on it and listen to what Papa Tuanuku's saying, then I think that's how we can heal our people.
They had little money, but a big dream to build homes for their whānau.
We thought it was a great opportunity to kickstart our whānau coming back into the Wairarapa. We didn't have the full funds, and so we thought we have nothing left to lose.
They resorted to give a little to raise funds.
Some of the children were offering their pocket money for the week. We had someone who kohād $43,000 just by themselves. We're just massively inspired by it.
Now, 3 years later, I'm back in the Wairarapa to find out what happened.
So we raised about just over $290,000 in the end.
Amber Craig, the driving force behind the project.
Just the outpour of love that we received from everyone was so amazing.
The hapu put in their best offer, but they were outbid by another buyer. It seemed all hope was lost. But just a few months later, another property just across the Waiohine River came up for sale. They tried again.
We put an offer in and we actually put a letter in to write to the people to say, this is what buying this whenua means to our whānau, this is the history. The people who own this property, it was their kids that helped convince them that they should maybe not go with the top offer and choose our offer because they could be a part of land back.
The 20-hectare property cost $590,000. The whānau banding together to buy it. Their dream now a reality.
Half of it is for Ngāti Kahukura Āwhitia Uri, and then the other part has been purchased by our whanauna. To have this whenua means that we have somewhere to call home, somewhere where we can return back to.
Most of the whenua is steep and blanketed in native forests and pine. But all Amber sees is potential.
The cool thing about this whenua is that most of it is actually in native bush. So the return of our rongoa and the returning of our pātaka kai is really important for us on this journey.
She's living here as a kaitiaki with her young family.
I now have 2 babies since then. And the cool thing is that they will never know any different because they just get to grow up on this whenua beside our awa.
Land should have never ever been taken from us, from our tupuna. It was wrong. I don't have any fancy way of saying that. Being able to connect to something physically that you can see, to understand where your whakapapa comes from, where your tupuna have been connected to in the past, is hugely important.
Wairarapa iwi suffered massive land alienation in the late 1800s. Kahukura Āwhitia Uri Sheree Dewberry says the economic downturn of the 1980s caused even more disconnect.
We had the freezing works, the Waingawa freezing works, and that was pretty much the biggest employer in the Wairarapa at that time. So when that closed, a lot of our whānau moved away, so we lost a lot of our Wairarapatanga.
This way.
But they now want whānau to return home.
Part of my job with being the first one here is to help prepare the land. There's a lot of mahi to do. We are scoping out the ability to roll out at least 10 30 square metre whare here and look at communal areas as well.
Now they've got the land, work is underway to put whare on it.
So since you last joined us, we have managed to get hold of this warehouse.
They've bought a CNC printer, which creates the building frames for their houses.
From what we've been told, people see this as quite revolutionary.
Amber and her partner, Tūkotahi Phillips, both have full-time mahi. But all of their spare time is spent collaborating with architects, designers and engineers to develop their housing model.
So they're modular builds, but being modular means that we're able to stand stuff up quickly, getting from nothing to pretty much establishing a whare in 2 to 4 days with waterproofing.
They can build a 30 square metre whare for $90,000 and they want to build 10 of them. But to be able to keep up this innovation, they need major investment.
With the Pledge Me investment campaign, what we're hoping to do is make this more full-time and that we can press go, pretty much. Let's get it done.
Once again, they're turning to social media, aiming to raise $100,000 for the Te Whare Hanga Hanga project. Because there's an urgent need.
Every time that we wait is more whānau that are dying in cold, damp homes.
Building environmentally sustainable housing is also essential.
Not destroying papatūānuku is mandatory for us.
Those who donate will own shares in Te Whare Hanga Hanga.
We've tried to make that as minimal as possible, so $100 our whānau can own a piece of Te Whare Hanga Hanga and be part of our journey of what we're trying to achieve, which is to house everyone. Being able to turn that into more an official business where it can at least cover its own costs would stress me out a lot less. So 100,000 is our minimum that we have to get to by August 19th at 8 p.m. So if we don't make that, the money's returned.
This Matariki whānau were able to spend time on the land.
Amber already had the brazier burning, and it was just like a sense of calm when we were all standing there. Especially when it got to the part of remembering the people that had passed, and you just feel so connected.
How much would it mean to you to see whānau living on that whenua again, papakainga set up?
I think, so you just saying that warms my heart. It would just, again, it would give that connection back to our tupuna.
It will be an intergenerational project, so we might not get there in my lifetime, but my babies will be brought up here and they will continue on this mahi along with the other whānau that will return home. Sometimes we just got to have a dream, and sometimes you just got to not let go and compromise, and I feel that's what we've tried to do here.
Hei te wiki e tū mai nei e Hoama, coming up next week on The Hui. A young whānau with everything to be grateful for.
Nothing really in my life has ever been bad, so I've just thought, no, I've got it pretty good, like nothing's going to ever happen to me.
But that all changed 2 years ago.
I don't know how to explain the depth of grief.
She had a right to be fully informed, and she wasn't.
That this was preventable.
It was preventable.
Now a whānau is demanding better maternity care for wahine.
Every day it has an impact on our lives. Every day we're thinking of Aurora. Every single day.
Kua painga katoa a tātou kōrero ki tēnei hui ia nei nā. We'll have more next week. Kia mau, ki te tūranga o taputapu ātea. Haumi e, hui e, tā aiki e. Nā te puna whakatongarewa, te hui i tautoko.